Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I am Mr. Zulu, and I'm interviewing Ironhorse 7. How are you doing today, sir?
Doing well, thank you very much. How about yourself?
So, sir, when did you join the Army?
I joined in January 1986. About a year after graduating high school, I decided to go to college for a year. I was too young and too immature to do that, so my option was to
Join the Army.
join the Army.
And what MOS did you go for
I
at the
went
time?
to, actually I was in the very first class of 19 kilo OSIT at Fort Knox, Kentucky. Basic training started in January and we graduated in May. And like I said, my class was 2 platoons of basic trainee privates and 3 platoons of reclassification inserts that joined us after white phase was over.
Oh, is it still the same as today where you have red, white,
Red, white, blue,
and then black and
black.
gold? Okay.
Yep.
So, the first class on the M1
First
then?
class on the M1s. We trained at Fort Knox on the XM1 tanks. We had the only company of XM1s at 1st Armored Training Brigade, and everybody else that was training on armor were 19 Echoes instead of 19 kilos, and they were still training on the M60 series tanks.
Oh, wow. That's surprising. Okay. So then what was your first unit?
My first unit was Delta Company 133 Armor in Gelnhausen, Germany, part of the 3rd Armor Division.
Third Armored. Third Armored
Spearhead.
doesn't exist anymore,
Does
unfortunately.
not. They deactivated after Desert Storm.
And so, in Delta 133,
Yep.
so like let's go through the first, I'd say, your whole time there.
Right.
So you got when did you get there?
I got there after, everybody gets 2 weeks of leave after basic training graduation. I went back to home where I grew up and went to high school, went to college, and spent 2 weeks at home and packed my bags and caught a flight out of St. Louis, Missouri, landed in Frankfurt, Germany in the end of May of 1986, and went straight from 21st Replacement at Frankfurt to Gelnhausen, Germany. Got assigned to Delta Company. I was in 3rd Platoon as a tank driver in 3rd Platoon on the Lieutenant's tank. My loader and 2 other platoon mates were all out of the same basic training class. So there was a group of like 4 of us that wound up going into the same company in the same platoon right out of basic training.
Okay, all right.
So
And
it wasn't like, it was, and that was really good because it wasn't like you were going there and not knowing somebody. We had people that we knew because we'd spent the last 18 weeks together, suffering through hell at Fort Knox in OSIT. So it was kind of fun.
yeah,
It's
went
kind of
through
fun.
something similar on
Yeah,
mine.
and it was just kind of, a luck of the draw, I guess, that we all wound up in the same platoon together, all 4 of us.
That's awesome. And so you were at that unit from May of '86
Yep.
until when?
Until after Operation Desert Storm was over, and we redeployed from Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, back to Germany.
Then you had to draw it. All right. So let's
Yeah.
let's do everything before Desert Storm.
Okay, sure.
So everything but the train up for Desert Storm.
Okay, so, but like I said, I got there 1986. The unit was 133 Armor. When I got there, the unit was just getting issued. They had just got issued their M1s. They had turned in their M60 tanks and was in the process of drawing their M1s.
Oh, so you're ahead of the
105s.
curve.
Yeah, 105s. And all of the existing permanent party members of the unit, they had just gotten back from Grafenbeer where they went through net training with the net team. At the time, net team was completely U.S. Army instructors. They were all 19 Echo, 19 Kilo tank crewmen, NCOs as net instructors. So they had finished net and had just gotten back, probably within a couple weeks of our arrival there. So they looked at us like, oh, these dumb privates don't know nothing, but we knew more than all the NCOs because we'd already been on the tanks where they had just gotten them. But anyway, so we had the 105 millimeter cannon M1 tanks. We did a lot of gunnery, a lot of Grafenwehr rotations, a lot of Hohenfels rotations.
So what are so I don't know what those are, and I'm sure most people have no idea what Grafenwehr and Hohenfels rotation are.
Grafenwehr training area. It's still today. It's the U.S. Army's tank gunnery range site in Germany. It's also got a military installation for the German Army, then military installation for U.S. Army, and then it serves as the United States Army USARA training center, if you will, for tank gunnery, Bradley gunnery.
Okay, so is there like an NTC at Graf or?
That would be Hohenfels, which is CMTC, Combined Training Center in Hohenfels, which is probably about an hour drive from Grafenwehr, and that's where all of the maneuver training would take place. And typically, a training rotation, we would load the tanks on the train out of Gelnhausen. They would take the train, we would ride with the tanks on the train, take about a day to get down there on the train, unload at Graf, spent about 3 weeks in Graf doing our level 1 gunnery, going through all the tables from table 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 8, and sometimes all the way up to 12, which is platoon qualification gunnery. And then we would road march on the Autobahn, the tanks from Grafenwehr to Hohenfels, and go right out of a gunnery right into a maneuver training, CALFEX or STX, situational training exercise at Hohenfels. And then we would spend 30 days at Hohenfels before we would rotate back on the train back to Gelnhausen.
Oh my God!
And then start all over again every 6 months.
So that was like every 6 months. You
about
basically
every
going
6 months, yeah, pretty much like clockwork. Every 6 months you were gone for two months out of every 6 months on a rotation like that. And then anytime at that same time when 3rd Armored Division was in central Germany, the 11th ACR and the 2nd ACR were actually on the East German, West German border locations.
Fulda Gap, if I
Fulda
understand.
Gap, exactly. So where I was at in Gelnhausen was 45 minutes on the Autobahn from the Fulda Gap. So what would happen when, let's say 11th ACR, when their squadrons had to go do their gunnery and Hohenfels rotation, our units would take their place on the border for that 2 or 3 months. So during our 4 months that we would normally get, you would think back at home station. No, not necessarily. We're doing other missions.
Out the line, staring at the Soviets, making sure they don't.
Looking at Russians, looking at us. Looking at East Germans, looking at us.
Wow.
So I did that from 86 to 90, and I progressed from, I came in the Army as an E2. With what little college I had, I came in as an E2 instead of an E1. And I progressed from E1 to sergeant promotable within the first 3 years in the Army.
So it pretty much would have been 6 and 4.
Yeah.
That's it. I've met some people today or these days that have done that. It's still rather uncommon.
Yeah.
Didn't happen to me. I got demoted a whole bunch.
Yeah. No, I progressed fairly quick right up to sergeant promotable, and just before Saddam Hussein had invaded Kuwait in 90, 3rd Armored Division got orders to deactivate, and we were in the process of deactivating the unit and scattering the soldiers and the equipment to the winds. If you had enough time in Europe already, you would rotate back to the States, in theory, to Fort Hood or Fort Knox or whatever you had orders to go to. At that time, I was scheduled to depart Germany because I'd already been there, 4 years. If the soldiers that didn't have, more than 2 years, then they would have got transferred to a base in Germany that was staying active. But that got put on hold the moment that Iraq invaded Kuwait in August of 1990. So we stopped our deactivation process and stopped turning in equipment, and we'd actually turned in a lot of equipment and had people that were already scheduled to fly home or whatever, that their orders got canceled, and we wound up staying together.
So they lost a whole bunch of people?
A whole bunch of people in the whole division, and we wound up preparing for deployment. So from August until November.
Well, hold on.
Yep.
So at this time, you've been on the M1 and that was it?
Nope.
Or was it M1 IP?
Nope. We went from M1 to M1 IP, and then in '88, we got the M1 A1s. We went through a net gunnery in Grafenwehr in '88.
Okay, so in 90,
Yep.
you're getting your M1 A1s back.
Yep.
And getting ready to go to Saudi.
We had them ready to ship, we had all the BII put in the, storage boxes, the shipment boxes, and we had everything TI'd and ready to get turned in, and they said, oh, stop, wait, unpack them, get them ready for combat. And we had a little bit of time. Like I said, that came about in August, and by the end of August, the first part of September, we knew what was going to happen. We just didn't know when. So we had enough time to do one more gunnery. They scheduled us a short notice gunnery. So we did a gunnery rotation in October of that year, came back to Gelnhausen, and then did the serious preparation to start deployment. And we actually deployed right after Thanksgiving. So our division started deployment process between Thanksgiving and Christmas, and by Christmas Day of 1990, the entire division was on the ground in Saudi Arabia.
Wow. So what about, so it'd be, if I understand correctly, it was Desert Shield first?
Desert Shield first, yeah. That was the defensive perimeter that U.S. Army and coalition forces had staged to protect Saudi Arabia from invasion of the Iraqis in case they decide to come farther south out of Kuwait. My division was actually set up in defensive perimeters on the Saudi Arabia and Iraq border instead of the Saudi Arabia and Kuwait border. We were a little farther west in Saudi Arabia, basically north of the King Khalid military city compound, along the Wadi al-Batin Tapline Highway area.
So during that time, what kind of training were you doing prepping for it?
We did a lot of NBC training. We did a lot of.
So NBC was a very
highly. They just, the Army thought that Saddam Hussein and the Iraqis were going to throw all kind of chemical weapons at us. Wound up not being the case, but we did focus a lot on that. We focused a lot on night land nav. We got issued our first handheld GPSs.
Oh, the first version of the Dagger?
First version of the Dagger, which was actually called a plugger. It was the size of a freaking, remember the old 1980s cell phones that were huge? They looked like, everybody called them a brick. So those pluggers were about the same size as one of those handheld telephones.
A lot smaller today.
Yeah, a lot smaller today. We did a lot of that. We did a lot of land nav training with those plugger devices. We did a lot of training once we deployed and moved out to our assembly areas in Saudi Arabia, different movement to contact type formations within the company and within the battalion and brigade. We did a lot of bore sight training.
Bore sight to me is more important than just doing MRS update.
Yep, absolutely correct.
Let's
So by that time, I was, like I said, I'd gotten promoted from private E2 to sergeant promotable. And by that time, I had moved from loader, never was a loader, from driver to gunner to tank commander. So I was a wing tank commander at that time.
And what was your bumper number?
My bumper number at the time was Delta 32.
Still in 3rd platoon.
Still in 3rd platoon. I moved briefly to headquarters platoon as a gunner. I did one gunnery as the company XO's gunner, and then one gunnery as the company commander's gunner, and then I got selected to become a tank commander back in 3rd platoon.
And you went back to your old platoon.
Went
Nothing
back
wrong
to
with
the
that
old
at all.
Went back to the old platoon.
So there's something you and I talked about a while ago, and that was you had trained to swap loader and driver while on the move.
While on the move, yeah. So we had to move. Our movement to contact started. Let's go back to, we got to Saudi Arabia just before Christmas, and our tanks came in off the ship because we rail loaded in Gelnhausen. The ships went by rail to the port in northern Germany. Can't remember what port it was, but Bremerhaven. So they got loaded on a ship, one of the roll-on, roll-off ships, and then some of the unit went with the tanks. The majority of the unit flew from Frankfurt Flughafen, Rhein-Main Air Base, to Saudi Arabia, and then we met the tanks at the port. By the time we got there, our tanks were arriving within 3 or 4 days after we got on the ground. So we spent the first several days receiving the tanks. We had to send them to get painted while we were there because all of our tanks came from Europe and they were in the tricolor camouflage pattern.
It's a great camouflage
Great
pattern.
camouflage pattern, but it doesn't work so well in a desert environment. So
wonder why.
yeah, so they painted all of our tanks that solid sand color as soon as we got there. Got all of our gear loaded onto the tanks, and then started the road march from the port on the Gulf west out towards the middle of the country. And then each battalion was assigned a sector to set up all their company level assembly areas. And our assembly area was company assembly area, just a big huge circle of tanks with a company headquarters in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
You could see for miles because it was completely flat, terrain featureless.
I've seen that part of the world.
Yeah.
There ain't nothing.
There's nothing out there. Every once in a while, you would see a little herd of camels off in the distance.
we had the same problem in Kuwait.
But while we were in that assembly area in Saudi Arabia, we did a lot of that training, a lot of maneuver training, maneuvering from point A to point B. Maps were completely useless because you'd look at a map and it was just a blank piece of paper with grid squares on it. No terrain features noted. You're like, well, throw it in the spots box and never use it, and you wound up using that plugger, that handheld GPS to actually navigate, which was pretty good as long as you're going in straight line for a known distance at a known heading, and you would get to where that grid was. But we did a lot of that, and then when the actual air war started in February of 91, in fact the air war actually started on the day that my oldest daughter was born. Exact same day. 25th of January was when the air war started. And then just a few weeks later, the first week of February, we started packing up from our assembly area and moving closer and closer and closer to the Saudi Arabia-Iraq border, and eventually crossing into Iraq on the 18th of February.
So that's when you did your full-on Desert Storm.
Yep, and that's when it transitioned from Desert Shield to Desert Storm once the air war started.
So what was the op order brief that they gave you for that? That you're going to just go in and kill them?
It was conduct a movement to contact north to engage and destroy enemy forces from the Iraqi Republican Guard and drive them out of Kuwait and liberate the country of Kuwait from the Iraqi aggression.
So was your company, where was it on 3rd Armored's line?
We were at that, did I talk about transitioning from 133 to 38 Cav? Somewhere, and I don't remember exactly what year it was, but probably around the same time that we got our M1A1s issued, 88 or 89. You know how the Army likes to change things up on you every once in a while. They
no damn
redesignated battalions, and we became 3rd Battalion, 8th Cavalry instead of 133. Same unit, just here's a new unit crest. You're now
cool
38 Cav.
So you're still 3rd Armored, or you're
Yep,
part of it?
we're
Okay.
still 3rd Armored, but they folded the flag on 33rd Armored, and we became 38 Cav. I don't know why, but it is what it is. But anyway,
so your battalion was
my battalion was 38 Cav at that time.
correct, but I'm getting at, was it 2 platoons of or 2 companies of tanks and 2 companies
Nope,
of brads?
we were armor pure. We were armor
Okay.
pure. At that time, they really didn't do a whole lot of
The combined arms battalions.
combined arms battalions.
Okay. Right.
38 Cav at that time was four tank companies, Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, and Delta. Each had
Jesus.
14 tanks. Our brigade, we were 2nd Brigade, and it consisted of 38 Cav, 4A Cav, which was organized exactly what we were, with 4 companies of 14 tanks, and then 148 Infantry, which was 4 companies of Bradleys.
Okay. So where was your squadron
Yep.
on the line of 3rd Armored?
So when we made the movement to contact, we moved in a brigade diamond formation. So 3A Cav was the lead element of the brigade, with 4A Cav as the reserve and 418 Infantry kind of in the middle. And if you can imagine a V formation of tanks, you're probably used to a platoon V, where you've got 4 tanks that are shaped in a V moving north, or whatever the case is. It was the entire battalion spread out 100 meters between tanks in a large V, and then 2 companies of Bradleys down the left flank, and 2 companies of Bradleys down the right flank, and then a inverted V at the rear, which was 4A Cav. And then all 3 brigades of the division moved in the same way, but in a division V.
So you were the lead element
of
the lead
division.
battalion of
Yep. And
oh my God.
Delta Company happened to be the tip of the
Tip of the spear.
brigade V formation, the brigade diamond formation.
And was your platoon leading it?
And my platoon was the first 4 tanks at the far northern end of that tip,
Well,
moving
and
north.
since you were the 2-track, that means you led the entire division.
Yep, I did.
Oh my God.
We did have the division scouts in front of us, but at the time the division scouts consisted of, they had Bradleys at the time, and they were pretty much a kilometer in front of us. For some reason, we rolled past the division scouts. And and you were asking about rotating the driver and commander, or the driver and the loader, in and out of the driver's position. So we had to move from where our assembly area was north, about a 4-day road march. I don't remember exactly how many kilometers or miles it was until we got to our phase line that we eventually wound up turning 90-degree angle to the right on that famous right hook of General Schwarzkopf's plan.
Mm-hmm.
But that was 3 days of movement nonstop. We outrun our fuel several times, where we had to stop and wait on fuel to catch up with us before we continue our push north. But as we were driving and there was no time to stop and take breaks for sleep or rest or food or whatever. We all had enough water and MREs on the tank that we ate, slept, drank water on the move, and to keep drivers from falling asleep behind the wheel, whatever you want to call it. We got pretty good at slowing the tank column down to about 5-10 miles an hour, and then simultaneously all tanks would rotate their driver with their loader while the tanks were still
track pad
coasting along. So you lock the turret, have the driver open the hatch, the loader would jump out of the loader's hatch. Everybody kept the CBC on. The loader would undo the bailout connector, and he would, forehand bear crawl off the front of this turret, step down onto the front slope of the tank while holding on to the main gun. While he got there, he would tap on the driver's hatch to let him know he was there. The driver would rotate the hatch. Driver would push his T-bar in, lower the seat all the way down, stand up, get out of the tank. Driver would get in, connect the bailout. Driver would now become the loader. And we did that about, once every 4 to 6 hours, I guess. So that way you
yeah, because I've noticed when I've driven, to me, I think the limit's anywhere from 4 to 8.
Yeah.
It just depends on the person.
Yeah, and so driver and loader switched out. Tank commander and gunner would switch out at opposite frequencies, and that was a little bit easier to transition. Tank commander.
Yeah, you just pull down the shoulder guard.
Yeah, pull down the shoulder guard, and I would move over to the loader's position to get real tight with him, while the gunner would slide straight up into my seat for a while, and I would slide down into his, and at that point in time, I would take a little nap.
So during that first 3 days, was there
nothing? Absolutely nothing. We crossed the border into Iraq where the Iraqis weren't, because they were so singular focused on everything coming across the border from Saudi Arabia into Kuwait that they didn't even protect their entire western flank of Iraq. So we moved for 3 days without seeing a soul.
That must have been boring as hell.
Oh yeah, it was. It was extremely boring. Just driving, 40 miles an hour across open desert terrain, not seeing a thing, until on that third day when we made that right hook, and probably, an hour after we made that right turn, the entire 7th Corps did a complete right wheel movement. And as we did that...
And what time was that? Late at night?
That was very early in the morning, well before dawn on the, I don't even remember, 21st of February. Don't get me lying on dates, because it's been 30 some odd years now. But I remember it was like just before dawn on that third day of movement. Actually, Larry Dunson, tank commander on the 3-3 tank, his gunner saw a couple hot spots in the distance, 3,400, 3,500, somewhere around there, 35 to 3,600 meters, saw a couple spots, looked at them in 10 power, could make them out to be armored vehicles of some sort. And then he was able to distinguish that distinctive V-shaped splash guard
and
on the hull and the bulb-shaped turret, and recognize that those were T-72s. At the same time, my gunner noticed the same thing. Dunson yelled out, "Contact tanks front, T-72s," and followed by a kaboom.
So first round fired at way too early in the damn morning.
Yeah, probably like 4 something in the morning. 4 something in the morning. Something
and
like that.
I'm assuming your fellow tank commander first round hit at 3,500 meters.
Yep. and then my rounds were the second rounds fired. My gunner, he picked up tank targets same time, and by the time our contacts reports were out across the net, the company was starting to fall in line with us, and they were starting to acquire targets. And the more we started engaging, the more targets we started seeing. And before you know it, Dunson had probably taken out 16, 17 tanks. I had taken out likewise, same amount of number of tanks. And by the time him and I had engaged everything, there was hardly anything. I think there was probably 2 or 3 other tanks that might have gotten 4 or 5 tank kills each, but I think Dunson and I probably got the majority of them.
Well, sometimes better be lucky than good.
Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. Absolutely correct. But once we identified the tanks, identified targets, started engaging, company got online. Tank battle was over in a matter of 5-10 minutes.
Wow.
And everything that was left on the battlefield after that was in fuego, let's say.
So the Iraqis pretty much started surrendering to you
yeah,
right away?
They did. In fact, we found out that the majority of the tanks that we were engaging, as soon as the first several tanks went up in flames, the tank crews completely unasked the tanks, and they went to shelter any place they could find it, and just they abandoned their tanks and abandoned their equipment and hid until daylight. And then once it started becoming obvious to them that if they were on a tank or near a tank, it was going to explode, so they got the hell away from them as soon as they could. And then at daybreak, we started seeing Iraqi tank crews and soldiers starting to come our way with their hands raised with, whatever white they could wave above them, whether it was
that fast.
Underwear, yeah, that fast. Yeah,
Really?
They didn't put up a fight at all. There was 1 or 2 tanks that tried to fight it, but
now, why do you think that the entire United States military at that time, why do you think that we were able to accomplish what we did in those 96 hours?
Technology. We had the superiority of technology that they didn't. Everything from the F-117 stealth fighter to the Abrams to the Bradleys with our laser rangefinders and our thermal sights that they didn't have. They didn't have, comparable night vision. They didn't have comparable laser rangefinder, fire control stabilization. Our equipment was just so much more overmatched than theirs was. They really didn't stand a chance. And then, we trained to fight the Russians on,
which had what, 173 motorized divisions?
Yeah. So we were training the entire time in Germany to withstand the German forces and to engage German forces at 2,500 meters and beyond. So our gunnery skills were a lot better than theirs. They really. And we train tank commanders to be tank commanders and not robots. Go figure.
Yeah, it's one thing. Okay,
so you take out Russian leadership, and the Russian tank company doesn't know what to do because there's nobody to give the order. If you take out the lieutenant, the company commander, there's nobody to give the order, so the sergeant doesn't know what to do.
Versus us, you kill the LT. Well, now we're off the leash.
Yeah.
You have no idea what we're going to do.
And and we trained tank commanders, E5 tank commanders to become a platoon leader, platoon sergeant at any time necessary. In fact, we trained for it all the time. We would go to Hohenfels and you would do force on force training. The first person that the OC would,
notionally
kill was the platoon leader, platoon sergeant, and now the 2 wing tanks have got to take over the platoon and run the platoon. So, I trained to be a platoon sergeant, platoon leader as a buck sergeant.
Oh, okay. So then, that was pretty much day 4 of your Desert Storm, to where you destroyed the enemy formation.
Yep.
Or, correction, was it you, in close distance, or was it engage the, or close in with the enemy, engagement in close combat, and destroy him with shock and awe? Which the M1 was designed for,
Yep,
thankfully.
exactly. And as soon as it started, it was over very quickly right after. In fact, daybreak came. There was absolutely hardly anything left on the battlefield except for a few odds and end vehicle. Funny story. We were sitting there just scanning to see if there's anything left. It's daylight now, and nothing out there is moving. I hear bang, bang, bang on the side of my tank, pop up out of the hatch, and it was, I didn't know it, but in the middle of the night, some of the Bradleys from 418 infantry had gotten crowded, so they started moving Bradley in between, because our tanks were spread out, 50 to 75 meters apart. So first time I looked out of the tank and actually looked and seen what was going on around me, and I noticed that there was a Bradley on left and right, and I'm like, where the hell did y'all come from? And they're like, well, they told us to fill in the spots between the tanks. Okay, fine. And they're like, hey, can you shoot that? The Bradley commander was on the ground, trying to get my attention, and I'm like, shoot what? He goes, right there. And I'm looking, and I grab my binos. He goes, no, you're looking too far. Look there. And I looked, and literally 75 meters in front of my tank was a BMP-1 in a 10-meter hole in the ground. I'm like, it's dug in. He goes, yeah, I know. I've tried shooting it with the 25, and it won't get through the dirt. And I'm like, well, it's too close for sabot petals to peel off, so that's not gonna do anything. And heat round is gonna hit the dirt and explode and do nothing. I thought, I'd been up for 4 days, no sleep, kind of stupid in my head. I'm like, yeah, we'll do something with it. I turned to my loader. I said, Stevens, grab one of those claymores, because they had given us claymores to put on the infantry rails of the turret to protect in case anybody decide to mount your tank. So we had those strapped onto the infantry rails of the side of the sponson boxes. Grabbed one of those, threw on the Kevlar and the chicken vest. You know what I mean? We didn't have the OTV and all that other stuff. So what tankers got issued for ballistic armor was the Kevlar, what we called the chicken vest.
I still had one.
Yeah. So that's what armor we had, and the one M16 issued to the tank. Grab that M16, grab that Claymore, and let's go do this. And literally what we did was we took that Claymore mine, and tankers aren't real skilled at low crawling, so we did a hybrid high crawl, low crawl, whatever you want to call it, from our tank to that BMP, trying not to be seen. And when we got close enough to it, literally him and I stood up and ran the last 10 feet and threw that Claymore into the commander's hatch of that BMP, and then ran as far back as we could and hit that firing device and blew that son of a gun to kingdom come. So, one BMP destroyed. Check.
That might be like the tank equivalent of a certified knife kill.
Yeah, so, and it was kind of funny because, fast forward several years later, we're watching Save It Private Ryan. They're talking about a sticky bomb. Screw a sticky bomb. Use a Claymore. It's better.
Yeah. Well, they didn't have in World War II.
They didn't have
All right,
Claymores
so
in World War II. They had sticky
after
bombs.
your 4 days of
Yep.
romping through the desert sand.
Yep, they decided, well, we've done enough damage, we're going to cease fire in place, and count your ammo and resupply, restock, get some rest. So we stayed basically where we were for another 2 days, and we took turns sleeping. We slept in like 12-hour shifts.
I wonder why.
Yeah, wonder why. And then our next order was they gave us a highway intersection to overwatch platoon at a time. So we would rotate a platoon to this highway, basic, four-way highway intersection out in the middle of nowhere. So you'd have one platoon on that highway, on that intersection, and the other platoon's back doing maintenance and rest and whatever else. And so we did that for about, 2 or 3 weeks. And then they moved us to another place to provide overwatch. And basically all we were doing, we were traffic control, making sure that anything moving north was authorized to move north and absolutely nothing moved south. So we had, tons and tons and tons of people that were displaced from wherever, were trying to get to wherever we were going, and we just kind of did that for the remainder of our time there. So from February till June.
You had one really high, and that was about it.
That was about it.
Ah.
That was about it.
Yeah, but you got to do something that hadn't been done since Kursk.
Yeah. Yep.
In 1943, not the present day Kursk
Yeah,
or whatever that disaster is.
Yeah.
Okay, so then, as you said before, you already had your deployment orders. That means you guys probably did your draw. You guys went back to Germany, did your drawdown, and then you went over to Hood, right?
Well, actually, I was one of the lucky few to get orders for the 5th Infantry Division. And you ask, where the hell is the 5th Infantry Division?
Where is that?
It doesn't exist anymore. It deactivated. We moved, probably half of the soldiers in my unit wound up going to Fort Polk, Louisiana.
Ugh.
At the time, was probably the only division that did not deploy to Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm. And the intent was we would go to Fort Polk and rebuild that unit, because that unit got, all of the soldiers that were at Fort Polk wound up getting deployment orders for other divisions and other units that were going, and a lot of them went with 2nd Armored Division, 1st Armored Division, 3rd Armored Division, 3rd Infantry Division. Everybody that deployed, they got, replacement soldiers out of 5th Mech, and it needed to be reconstituted. So that's where a lot of our, folks from 3rd Armored Division and elsewhere, 8th Infantry Division from Germany, when they deactivated, they wound up sending a lot of people.
That must have sucked, going from the nice German countryside to Louisiana.
Hot, sweaty, swampy Louisiana. Yep, absolutely correct. And so I was at Fort Polk, Louisiana for about a year, and they said, "Oh, guess what? We're going to deactivate 5th Mechanized, and it's going to become the Joint Training Readiness Center, where the JRTC is what it became." So, well, where's 5th Mech going to go? Well, 5th Mech is going to reflag as 2nd Armored Division, and we're going to pick up the unit, move the unit to Fort Hood. I'm like, well, why did you deactivate 2nd Armored Division 2 years ago if you were just going to reconstitute it? It didn't make a whole lot of sense, but that's what we did.
When has the Army ever made sense?
Yeah, it never does. It never does. So wound up leaving Germany and going to Fort Polk to stand that unit up, to reflag it, to move it, and that is what became 2nd Armored Division, which 2 years later at Fort Hood, guess what? You're going to become 4th Infantry Division. So that unit, when I got to Fort Polk, and eventually 3 years later at Fort Hood, same unit, same people, 3 different division patches, and 2 different unit crests.
Awesome.
Yeah. I don't even remember what battalion I was when I was at 5th Mech. All I remember we were an armored battalion at Fort Polk, Louisiana, wearing a 5th Mechanized Infantry black diamond, red diamond patch, and then changed that out for the 2nd Armored Division patch that you wore on your chest. And then we became
4th ID.
4th ID, yeah,
Okay.
same unit, but reflag, changed the patch 3 times and changed the unit crest. We were
one of the most Army things.
Yeah. I try to remember. It was 370 Armor was the unit that I was at Fort Polk. And then,
they're 1st Brigade, 1st Armored Division
Yeah.
now, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, strike swiftly.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So, yep, it just came to me. So when we transitioned and when we reflagged from 5th Mech, we also became 2nd Armored Division, and then they changed the unit designation to 167 Armor.
Which is 3rd Brigade, 1st Armored Division now.
Yep.
Okay.
And so I wound up at Fort Polk. I was tank commander in Alpha Company, and then when we moved to Fort Hood, not only did the unit at Fort Hood move to Fort Polk rather, moved to Fort Hood, they also had a lot of people that had already PCS to 167 to 2nd Armored Division, so it was like the unit was more than over strength. So here I am, E5 tank commander, and now I'm trying to compete for my job, and they're like, well, we've got too many staff sergeants, so you're not going to be a tank commander anymore. We're going to move you to headquarters company, and you're going to be the battalion commander's gunner and section sergeant and headquarters company. Like, oh, thanks, I appreciate that. So I wound up, you know, a little bit of protest, but how can you argue with it? And they're telling you that's what you're going to do, that's what you're going to do. So I wound up being battalion commander's gunner for probably about a year, and then they're like, okay, well, you can go back to being a tank commander in Charlie Company. So went from headquarters company as the battalion commander's gunner.
And this was in 167?
167. So I was, like I said, tank commander's gunner for a year. We got to Fort Polk in 93. 94, I became tank commander in Charlie, and then a year later, I wound up going to Master Gunner course at Fort Knox. Came back to Charlie, still tank commander, and also company Master Gunner. And somewhere along there, I finally got promoted to staff sergeant. Finally getting paid for the job that I'm doing.
For a few years at that point.
For a few years at that point, yeah. And I was staff sergeant tank commander in 2nd Platoon, Charlie Company. I was 2-3 then, so flipped the bumper number around. Instead of 3-2 now, I'm 2-3. And after, 9 months or so as tank commander, my platoon sergeant wound up PCSing, and we didn't get a new platoon sergeant in, so I became 2nd Platoon's platoon sergeant.
So is it that different from then to today? Because generally today it's the 3rd track generally has the least experienced TC, the 2 has the
Most
2nd,
experienced.
and then 4th is the platoon sergeant.
Yeah.
So was that how it was back then?
Yep. If you were the 3-2, you know, and it really, a lot of times I was the 2-3, the platoon sergeant's wingman, the guy that was the platoon leader's wingman. Both of us had probably about the same amount of experience or whatever. But me being the company master gunner as well, I kind of edged him out, you know, not necessarily seniority or experience, just kind of luck of the
draw.
Luck of the draw. I became platoon sergeant over him, and he honestly didn't want the job. He was happy being
The 2-track.
commander. Yeah, being the 2-track.
Sometimes if that's what people want to do,
Yeah.
it's better just to leave them there.
He liked being the NBC guy and all that other stuff, and I think they recognized that I probably had a little bit better leadership talent than he did, so I became platoon daddy.
So what tank did you have at that time? Was that the
I
heavy
moved
armor?
I moved to the 4 tank at that time.
No, I mean,
M1, A1,
that'd been what, the heavy armor or
heavy
heavy
or common or something, I can't remember.
Heavy armor, heavy common.
Yeah, something. It was an M1, A1.
Okay.
Yep, M1, A1, and did, you know, several NTC I did a couple NTC rotations from Fort Polk to. It was always fun going to NTC. So I think I did 2 rotations to NTC from Fort Polk, and then, god dang, 3 rotations, 4 rotations while I was at Fort Hood in 167. We did one exchange partnership with the Canadian Army. We sent half the battalion to Canada, and half a battalion of Canadian tankers came down to Fort Hood.
So they got to play with the M1 for a bit.
They got to play with the M1s.
Ooh.
And then I was in Charlie, and Charlie and Delta stayed at Fort Hood, and Alpha and Bravo went to Canada. I wasn't complaining because it was February and March.
Oh, yeah, that's,
Yeah,
no.
I'm like, nope, you guys go ahead. I'll stay in nice, somewhat warm Texas while you guys go play in the freaking knee-deep snow.
So what tank did they have? What did the Canadians have at that time? What, the Leopard 1
Yeah,
still?
Leopard 1s.
So going from a Leopard 1 to an M1A1 is
Oh yeah, they were loving that, man.
pretty big jump.
They loved the M1s. They loved the M1s as much as the Germans loved the M1s when we trained with the Germans. When we go out to play in the woods with the German army, we did that quite a lot in 3rd Armored Division. Most of the German army at that time had the first version of the Leo 2, so pretty comparable tanks. But we enjoyed getting on their stuff. They enjoyed getting on our stuff, and
Tankers being tankers.
Tankers
going,
being
ooh,
tankers,
what
man.
you got there?
What you got there? Let me see that. Let me see that. Yeah.
That still happens today. I've seen it happen.
Yep.
People hopping Challengers, Leopard 2s. But anyway, all right.
Yep. So,
We're at what, 95, 96?
95, 96. I'm platoon sergeant till 98. 96 to 98. I'm platoon sergeant in Charlie 167. I get orders to go to Fort Knox, Kentucky. So
That can only mean one thing.
So I called that branch. I'm like, hey, where am I going? And once I get to Knox, and they said, oh, you're going to the Master Gunner branch. You're going to be a Master Gunner instructor. I said, that's exactly where I want to go. Thank you very much. Whew, yeah. So I get, June 98, I PCS to Fort Knox. I get there. A guy that I was in school, Master Gunner school with, Bob West, he was in 367, same time I was in 167. He had gotten orders 2 months before I did, so him and his family had already moved to Knox, and he was also Mike Gulf branch instructor. So I thought, well, great, I'm going to have somebody there that I know, a battle buddy, whatever. Get to was it 16th Cav, 316, that was at Knox. Get there, signed in the unit. You got to go through, instructor certification and all that stuff. I get halfway through teaching a cycle, and Bob and I both get called into the commandant's office. We're in the middle of teaching a class, a maintenance class. Get called in to go see Top Baldwin, the maintenance team chief, commandant of the course, and he's like, hey, guess what, guys? You guys got DA selected. You're going to go to drill sergeant school. So, oh, nice.
Which is at what was that, Fort Jackson? No, today it's still, was it Fort Jackson?
Actually, it was at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri.
Ew.
So, him and I wound up going to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. But they didn't have a class ready for us. We got there in June, and it was
June of 98?
Yeah, so June, July, August. So end of August, September is whenever we got notified. But our class for drill sergeant school for DSS didn't start till January. So what are we supposed to do from August to July or January? They assigned us over to 1st Armored Training Brigade. Both of us wound up going to Alpha 281 Armor, and we were drill sergeant candidates for better part of a cycle, meaning that we're going to use you as a drill sergeant, but not going to pay you the pro pay or let you wear the hat.
Okay.
So we basically, we both shadowed other already certified drill sergeants for 3/4 of the cycle, and then January, we went to school in Leonard Wood. Came back and then started the first year of 3 for both of us in Alpha 281.
So that means January.
Mm-hmm.
That means you started being a drill sergeant in January. Well, probably what, March?
Yeah, because it's a 9-week course, and then you stay an additional 2 weeks to go to MFT, Master Fitness Trainer.
So that means
April or so was when we actually wound up
at Knox, right?
at Knox as a drill sergeant.
So April, that means you finished up your drill sergeant time as 9/11 happened.
Yeah, I was, well, I had wound up doing a 3rd year, so it was like at the beginning of my 3rd year is when 9/11 happened. So both of us were on the trail when 9/11 happened. Still had a little bit of time to go before we wound up PCSing. We PCSed, both of us right around the same time. I wound up going back to Fort Hood, and that was one of the benefits of volunteering for a 3rd year is you could pick station of choice. Bob's wife was from the Denver, Colorado area. They wanted to go to Fort Carson. I wanted to go to Fort Hood, so I picked Fort Hood. He picked Carson, and I wound up leaving Fort Knox in May of
2002.
2002. Took some leave. Got to Fort Hood in June 2002, and wound up going to First Cav.
You can't escape Fort Hood.
Can't escape Fort Hood. I wanted to go to Fort Hood, man. I liked it when I was there the first time. But this time I'm coming back to Fort Hood as a Sergeant First Class.
There you go. Guaranteed platoon sergeant.
Yeah.
Or battalion Mike Golf. Which one did you get?
Actually, I wound up going to brigade because I had already served, 2.5 years as tank platoon sergeant. I had served 3 years as a drill sergeant, and all the tank platoons were already, fully staffed with already E7 platoon sergeants that weren't fully branch certified yet, and I was already branch certified as a Sergeant First Class, so I was essentially waiting for a first sergeant position to come open, and what better way to do that was to be a brigade master gunner.
Yay!
Yay! Love staff.
Yeah, all the brigade Mike Golfs I have had I'd say pleasure, because most of them are pretty sharp.
Yeah.
Yeah, they fucking hated their lives.
I didn't mind it, but I got there just in time to go into NTC train up and level 1 brigade gunnery. So, in my mind, I had to reorganize from being company master gunner the last time I was a master gunner, in that seat, to all the way skipping battalion right into brigade. So now, instead of focusing training crew level gunnery tasks, now I'm the major land range and ammo coordinator for the brigade. So
basically just a glorified paper bitch.
yeah, so I'm spending the majority of my time either at the division ammo office, at the AHA, at range control, doing all that, coordinating ranges and training areas and ordering and forecasting ammo and making sure everybody has the right bullet for the right weapon system and the right quantities and all that other headache stuff that they don't train you how to do at Master Gunner School, but they assume that you know how to do it. So it's one of those things that you got to learn it on the fly. And I was lucky in the fact that the guy that was the division Master Gunner was a very good friend of mine, who I was, when I was Charlie 167 Master Gunner, he was Delta Master Gunner. And he got promoted just before I did, so by that time he was a master sergeant, and he got also moved from division to corps and became the corps master gunner, so I had, contacts on the inside. So anytime I needed a special favor, I'd pick up the phone and call the Corps Master Gunner, and people would get mad at me all the time because, damn it, I had that range and Corps Master Gunner blocked it and wouldn't let me have it. Now you got it. How did you get it? And I'm like,
I don't know.
I don't know. I asked for it, I got
Well,
it.
just as in all through life, it's about who you know, not what you know.
Yep, a lot of times that happens. But yeah, that was.
Actually, I do have a question about gunnery. So when
Yep.
when you went there as 167,
Yep.
did you guys go as the whole battalion, or did you guys just do a company at a time?
The gunnery?
Mhm.
No, we would go right into gunnery, and you know they would rotate on which company would be the lead company and which company would be the trail, and you know
So you'd have, let's say, Alpha Company shooting table 3
Yep.
through these first 3 days, then
Yep.
it's Bravo.
Yep.
Okay,
you'd follow one company through until everybody was done.
because I'm used to 135 to where it was Alpha and Bravo. They would at first try to do it like day 1 is Alpha, day 2
See,
is
and
Bravo,
you
and
gotta
that went to
think
hell.
now, you know, armor battalion, let's say 177 armor now. They've got 2 tank companies and 1 Bradley company. When I was in 167, we were still armor pure. In fact, we still had Alpha, Bravo, and Delta company, all 4 tank companies in 167. The last year I was there, right before I left, is when they cut Delta company, and we only had 3 companies of tanks. But we didn't have an infantry. The infantry was still
The infantry
2-8
battalion.
infantry. It was still 2-8 infantry.
Leave the crunchies over there. That's where they
Yeah.
belong.
And then, you know, 167 and 367 were still armor pure, and the infantry battalion was still infantry pure. Now, when we would go to NTC or we would go to train up or whatever, that's when we would task organize. And 167 would send a tank company to 2-8 infantry, and 2-8 infantry would send a tank company over to 167.
A Brad company.
The Bradleys, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, because I was, so they pretty much did the combined arms battalion of today, but just at NTC.
Yeah, but it wasn't organic. It was what they called OpCon. You were operationally attached or whatever.
Okay, because I've had that happen to me where my platoon got attached to our Charlie company.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So now we're at Brigade Mike Golf.
Yep. Getting ready to go to, you know, we did a NTC rotation in preparation for OIF, Iraqi Freedom rotation. OIF 3 was my rotation, my first rotation.
And that would have been what year you went to?
Oh, that would have been 2004. We were supposed to go earlier. We were supposed to deploy the same, like, you know, because 3rd Infantry Division was the first unit deployed. They deployed right in, and they're the ones that did the Thunder Run from Saudi Arabia up into Baghdad and took Baghdad and whatever else. Well, 4th ID and 1st Cav was supposed to go at the same time. And I don't know how much history you remember, but 4th ID was supposed to come in from the north. They were supposed to come through Turkey, and 1st Cav was supposed to come in through the south.
Yeah.
But for some reason, Turkey would not allow U.S. forces to go through Turkey. So that stopped that whole process, and like, okay, well, we'll just send 4th ID. They'll come in from the south, and then 6 months later, 1st Cav will deploy and come in wherever. But in that 6-8 month time frame that 4th ID deployed and we were getting ready to deploy, is when George Bush landed on the carrier. All hostilities have ceased and there's no more, you know what I mean? And it's now a peacekeeping, fighting the insurgency.
All the coin shit.
All the weird shit was getting ready to start, and you know, at the time, the division was thought that we were not going to be involved in heavy combat operations because George Bush said so, that all heavy combat operations have ceased. So there's no reason for us to take tanks, there's no reason for us to take Bradleys, we're just going to take all the soldiers and wheeled vehicles, and we're going to be peacekeeping and rebuilding, and and all these, huggy, touchy-feely, lovey things, and build the community back after we've destroyed them. And yeah, well, there was a certain gentleman that lived in Solder City, Baghdad, Muqtada al-Sadr, that he had different ideas.
Yeah?
So, 1st Cav Division got on the ground. My brigade, 1st Brigade, we had the Solder City section. 3rd Brigade, I think, had Fallujah. They've got a pretty nice bridge there in Fallujah. The Iraqis hung decorations from those bridges. U.S. contractors and soldiers.
Yeah, great decorations.
Yep. And like I said, we wound up with Solder City, and nobody had gone into Solder City and really saw what Solder City was about. And all you guys got to worry about is you'll go in, you'll patrol, you'll assist the Iraqi police making their daily patrol routes, and you'll provide escorts to and from BIOP and whatever. And yeah, okay. Well, we sent our very first mission from our brigade into Solder City, 1 platoon of infantry and 4 Humvees. And they did their route, they did their checks, they checked with the Iraqi police, they checked in with the Solder Bureau, everything's good to go. They got the high fives from everybody, the smiley faces, and the hey, mistas, until it was time for that patrol to be on its way out of Solder City and go back to Fob Ironhorse. And Solder City turned into Mogadishu. They turned the last corner that they were supposed to turn, and they ran into a school bus that was set on fire with that route blocked. So that caused them to do a U-turn and turn around and take a different route. They did that, and now they run into several taxi cabs that are on fire. And all hell broke loose. They started getting AK-47 and RPG fire, and before you know it, Sergeant Chin is a KIA in his turret, and they've got 6 or 8 wounded, and now they're trying to figure out how to get the hell out of there. And every road they take, every major road in Solder City is probably about half as wide as the normal streets that we drive on daily here in Poland. The alleyways are even narrower. There's no way to try to turn a Humvee around on one of those streets, and a 3-point turn turns into a 12-point turn.
Jesus.
And they're getting hit the entire time, and they're trying to get the hell out of there. And there's no way out. The only thing they can do, they've got 2 of the 4 Humvees that are completely disabled. They've got 1 KIA, 9 WIAs, and they're trying to get out of there as safely as they can. They wound up going into an Iraqi house, occupying the 2nd and 3rd floor and the rooftop, and try to just stay alive while the brigade tries to figure out a rescue plan. They launched 3 rescue missions that all 3 failed. All in total, in the first 72 hours, we had 28 KIAs and 172 wounded. They made a documentary about it, The Long Road Home, on Discovery.
So I'm assuming after that they spun up the tanks.
They spun up the tanks. They found out that 1st Armored Division was getting ready to rotate back to Germany at the time, and they stopped them from shipping their tanks, and we wound up getting 2 companies of tanks from 1st Armored Division and some Bradleys and stuff like that. And after that, it was every day was a combat mission in Solder City for the next 370 days.
15-month deployment?
12.
Oh, yeah.
12 months. And, yeah. No bueno.
No, that's
No bueno.
that's not a good time.
Nope.
So then after that year, so the first time in Solder City was the worst
Yeah.
of it. Then after that, once you, um, politically correct way to put this, domesticized the locals.
Yeah, yeah.
Or pacified them. There we go. That's a
Yeah.
better word.
We try to kill as many of them motherfuckers as we could, really, to be honest with you.
Oh, I figured as much.
Yeah.
Those kind of people that they only learn
Yeah.
at the end of a gun.
You know, and
unfortunately.
there were times that it was like low activity, and other times it would just be, you know.
Yeah, because a lot
Yes.
of my NCOs that I've had over my time, several of them were in. One of them was in Iraq in 2003. One of them was first in Fallujah in 2004, and they're all like tank commanders. And
Yep.
they told me it was pretty wild back then.
Yeah, it was definitely Wild Wild West.
Okay.
Speaking of Wild Wild West, I told you the story about my best friend, the guy that I went to master gunner school with, and him and I were company
Mhm.
master gunner. He was in 367. I at the same time I was in 167. Wound up going to drill sergeant school with and on the trail with him for 3 years. I've got him with me today. He's tattooed on my wrist. He was KIA in 2006 on Mother's Day.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
So, after OIF3,
Yep.
you're there.
Yep.
What happened after that?
So I went back to Fort Hood. I wound up, during that rotation, I wound up becoming the HAC Brigade First Sergeant for the last 3 or 4 months, because our First Sergeant was retiring and they sent him home early, and he retired, and I became the HAC First Sergeant. I was the HAC First Sergeant for, I don't know, 12 months or so.
So this has been 2005 then, right?
Into 2006, and during that time, we had a 1.5 year gap of non-deployment, that other divisions and brigades rotated, and then as we were getting ready to deploy for, would have probably been OIF 5, I guess, 2007. That big ugly C reared its head for the first time.
They're
And-
going to see.
Yeah. Cancer.
Oh.
Mantle cell lymphoma.
Mm.
So I wound up medically retiring, had to do 58 weeks of chemotherapy, and at that time it was just horrible chemotherapy. And I medically retired in 2007, and just before Christmas.
That's unfortunate. So
Yeah.
that concludes the Army part
That
of it. Now I get
concludes
to
the
talk
Army
about the
part.
fun part that
Yeah, the
I
fun part.
enjoy, the tank side.
Yeah. So after retirement and after my health had recovered, because I was essentially I went through the whole chemotherapy while I was still active duty. So the last
So that means you actually retired in 2008, because that had been 20 years.
2008.
That means you just
Yep.
reached it and then you retired.
Yep. And that last year or so, when I was undergoing treatment, and I was back and forth from Burke Army back to Fort Hood, the brigade deployed during that last deployment. Of course, they didn't deploy me, but they made me the rear detachment command sergeant major.
Oh darn! It must have been horrible.
Oh, it was. I hated it, because I mean, when I wasn't puking in a bucket, I was knocking on some poor wife's door,
Mm.
or
That okay?
standing
Yeah,
in
that
some chapel during a memorial service for somebody.
that fucking sucks.
And yeah, and that's probably the worst job I've ever had in my life. The survivor's guilt alone from that job is what really pushed me over the edge. And I was, by that time I was like, I'm done. I'm done.
Yeah.
I couldn't have stayed. I couldn't stay in the Army any longer after that. There was no way I would have been able to tolerate one more day of that hell. But that part done, now it's time to start a new career, a new life. I told you that really good friend of mine was the Corps Master Gunner the same time I was the Brigade Master Gunner. When I retired, he was still the Corps Master Gunner, but he was no longer active duty. He was the civilian.
Oh, it's
Master
the civilian people that don't do anything.
Yeah.
Allegedly.
So he he called me and he goes, "Hey, I know you're getting ready to retire. I know you had some health issues, but he goes, I got a favor to ask of you." He goes, "We just signed a new contract with 3 Corps for a defense contractor. I'm not going to name any contractors' names, but they've been given the contract to run Clabber Creek, Jack Mountain Range Complex with the DMPRC." I'm like, "Okay, what's that got to do with me?" He goes, "The people that they have in leadership positions do not know what the F they're doing." He goes, "I need somebody that knows what they're doing with it, that one, knows how to identify a tank 2 out of 3 times. Because the folks out there don't know the difference between a tank, a Bradley, a Humvee, or whatever. You know tank gunnery, you know how tanks work, you know how unit gunnery works, you know how to set up and run a range." He goes, "None of the folks out there that this particular defense contracting company, they don't know that. They know how to run a business, but they don't know how to run a tank range." And he goes, "I'm going to send you a phone number and an email address. Submit your resume, please." And I told him, I said, "Joe, I will do this because you're my bro. You're my friend." I said, "But I'm not going to make a career out of it. It's not what I want to do. I want to go to work for the company that we work for now."
Yeah.
And I said, "That's not the right company for me." He goes, out of respect for you, and you've done me a lot of favors in the past," he goes, I told him, I said, "I'll give you 1 year. I'll work for that company for a year. I'll get their head out of their third point of contact, show them what right looks like, get their range running."
Get their operator headspace and timing
Yep,
right.
absolutely. And then upon completion of 1 year, then you are going to help me get the job that I want to have with the company that I'm supposed to be with.
Yeah.
So,
All right. So
I-
talking tanks then.
yep.
So when your unit first got the M1s,
Yes.
how much of an upgrade did a lot of your peers and superiors think the M1 was compared to the M60?
I don't know. I've never on the M60.
No, I'm saying what your peers said.
What they liked it. They enjoyed it. They M60. What I've been told was a great defensive tank. You put that tank in a defensive position, hands down the best tank to use in a defensive fighting position. But offensively, it
Lackluster.
It lacked stability. It lacked accuracy because the fire control system just was not what the Abrams fire control system was. And having the ability to not only shoot on the move, but shoot and kill on the move up to 45 miles an hour at extended ranges that we can shoot targets and kill targets at now was just so much more better because they were limited. They could do 5 to 10 miles an hour and be able to shoot and hit a target 1,000 meters, 1,500 meters away. Where you know as well as I do. Well,
1,500 meters. We're just getting started.
yeah, exactly.
we're just warming up.
25, 26, 27, 3,000 meters, and you're doing 35 miles an hour. You can still, knock a turret off.
Like, I drilled a porta potty at 3,500 at NTC with training ammo though. Which, as you know, is in my golf, training ammo is not exactly the most accurate.
No, it's not. It loses.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, this is future Mr. Zulu here. Sorry to cut it short for the interview. I want to sit there and talk the technical side of tanks, the M1, the M1 IP, the M1A1, M1A1 heavy armor, heavy common, M1A2, M1A2 SEP, that kind of stuff. But we ran out of time. Ironhorse 7 had a pressing personal engagement, so unfortunately didn't get to talk tanks this time, but next time there will be. So there will be an episode 2 with Ironhorse 7. Be looking forward to that in the future. Might not be next week, but it'll be in a few months. Wish it could be, but we all have our own personal lives. Thank you for listening of my interview of Ironhorse 7. I thank Ironhorse 7 for the interview. It was great to interview a Desert Storm tank commander. And it was also a great time. It's great to talk to former tankers as well, because they are as much a piece of history as the tanks are themselves. Because the M1A1, while a great tank, got to have good tankers to operate it. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, so I can interview more and more tankers. That's my only goal, is just interview tankers on this channel. That's it. Thank you again.